So here you have it. The Manhattan Project is on the ground for the first time with the body on it. So as you saw, everything went pretty smooth yesterday when we got the body back on the chassis. There was a few little adjustments I had to make. I hadn't cut anything out of the inner wheel tubs for the axle when it goes up into the notch. And so the first time I tried to air out the suspension, the back of the body lifted off of the frame, and we quickly figured out what was going on. So I had to jack it back up, take the wheels off, and just do a quick and crude chop of that inner wheel well so that the rear axle would clear. I'll go back and clean all that up after I'm done putting new sheet metal back in the rear. All my calculations as far as how much to section off of the bottom of the frame were pretty much spot on. The car could be maybe 3/16 of an inch lower to completely be laying on the rocker. Right now it's actually touching the rocker, but there's kind of some louvers on the bottom of the rocker, I would assume for draining any water that gets out of there and anything else. And you know, those could always be shaved down and removed to get that extra little bit of clearance. The inner pinch weld from the inner rocker to the outer rocker, I already removed. And so that gave me an extra 3/4 of an inch to go down. In hindsight, I could have cut out another 3/16 or 1/4 of an inch of the frame and then use some pieces of metal at the corners to space it so that it's perfect. But I mean, once the rocker molding is on there, that's pretty much gonna be laying right on the ground. So really happy with how it turned out. Everything's nice and even, as you can see as well. All of the calculations I made with the front suspension ended up working out. We have about an 1/8 inch of shock travel left before they are fully bottomed out when it's aired out. So I nailed that pretty perfectly. The rear has a little bit more travel left in it, maybe about 1/4 inch. Really happy that all my calculations worked out. It's a measure twice, cut once kind of thing, but when you're building a C-notch and the whole rear suspension from scratch, you really got to lay everything out, either in a computer program, or what I did is I drew it out on graph paper and on my welding table, and I measured everything multiple times. I drew everything out, and then I put that to the side, and then I did the whole process again and compared the two and made any little adjustments from there. And everything worked out perfect too, because the rear lays all the way out with the bags almost fully compressed. I imagine that there's some internal bump stops on the airbags, but the airbags could compress maybe another 1/4 inch. And so I nailed the height of the notch pretty perfectly. And so I'm really happy with that. I got the rear axle centered really well in the wheel well. Since it's a triangulated 4-link setup and the car has about 6 inches of travel, the wheelbase actually grows as you go up with the suspension. And so when it's laid out, the wheel is a little more towards the front of the fender opening. When it's at ride height, it's dead nuts in the middle, and then when it's aired all the way up, it's a little more towards the back. So that worked out perfect. Of course, all of the suspension links are adjustable anyways, so I can adjust the actual wheelbase of the car as well as the pinion angle and everything like that. But really happy that everything worked out perfectly there. Everything on the front suspension has been working out great. About the only thing that I would change in hindsight and still might change is I went with a 7-inch bag up front instead of a 6-inch bag. And The reason for that is just because that's where a lot of the weight of the vehicle is with the real heavy engine and everything else going on. And so I chose to do that 7-inch bag up front, but it takes up a lot of real estate, and at full lock, the brake caliper actually contacts the bag at ride height. But you know, how many times am I gonna be going to full lock? It'll be in a parking lot, and it touches it with a smooth part of the caliper, so I'm not worried about any abrasion or anything. So I don't think that in and of itself is a big deal. So I may try to find a 6-inch bag that has the same specs, the same mounting pattern, so I don't have to drill new holes or modify anything there, and has the same amount of stroke, so that I can just get a little smaller diameter to make everything clear in there as well. Also, when it's aired all the way up, the top control arm ball joint where it connects the knuckle, that touches the airbag as well. But I'll never be driving the car much fully aired up. That'll just be if there's a big speed bump or like a driveway I have to get into. And so I'd be going at really slow speeds, so I'm not super concerned about that either. But that's just something to think about. And so I very well may end up switching to a 6-inch bag. Airbags aren't super expensive, so you know, it's just part of the learning process. Today I'm making a bunch of lists of parts that I need to order so I can just keep everything moving along smoothly. I have a lot of parts over on my pallet rack already, but I want to get as much as I can here so that we can just, you know, we already hit the ground, we just got to keep running. So do that, and then the next big project is the sheet metal for the trunk pan, and the C-notch is going to be the next big thing here that we're going to be undertaking. And for that, I have some experience doing some bead rolled panels and some tin work, but nothing to this extent. I'll be using a lot of the new tools I got, like my Mittler Brothers bench press that I have the shrinking and stretching dies. So I'll be able to make all of the mounting flanges really nice for those new panels that are going in. I have my slip roll, which I haven't used yet. That won't get used for the rear of the car, but that'll get used for the drive shaft tunnel and the transmission tunnel. And then of course I have my sheet metal brake as well, which will come in handy everywhere on the sheet metal aspect of this build.
Probably sit around and cook some soups and eat bread and desserts and just get all fat and sassy.